You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. One of my most impressionable learnings from conversations with multiple guests on the RevOps Champions podcast in the last year was the power of processes, frameworks, and models. I, like many entrepreneurs, had to find out the hard way about the sanity and growth that comes with incorporating processes, frameworks, and models into a business. Entrepreneurs are typically better at creating new things instead of scaling existing ones. One example is why business operating systems like those developed by EOS and others have become so popular for small and mid-sized entrepreneurial businesses. Once a business knows how they provide repeatable value to their customers, the focus on operational efficiency and employee and customer experience become the pillars on which they scale and grow. To do that, they incorporate stronger processes and adopt frameworks and other proven models to make scaling easier. Let's hear from some of our guests from the past year, sharing examples of how processes and frameworks enable growth. This is what we see all the time, is that you cannot. So when we start working with a new client, they think they're coming to us for a CRM, right? Which ultimately is what we need to deliver. But we cannot implement and deliver a CRM without being very, very clear about what their KPIs are. In other words, what we call their data. What is their critical business data, which is then also directly related to the processes that they run in marketing, sales, customer service. And then if we're integrating with their back-end systems, the processes all have to be very clear, or we have to guide them through potential changes.
Otherwise, you're going to fail, right? Because they don't know what's going on.
Absolutely.
What's the problem that we're trying to solve? What's that core problem that we're trying to solve? And then make sure we've got the right software and systems. And it's not volume of systems. It's more, we might only need one tool and it can solve 80% of that problem, but let's make sure that tool is really good at solving 80% of that problem. It's very often very hard to solve 100% of the problems that you have. And if you do, you're spending a lot on technology probably to get there. And again, it creates a lot of confusion for the rep. Should I use this system or this tool or that tool? So if you can really deeply solve 80% of a problem, then you're often in a better spot than trying to lightly solve 100% of a problem. And again, that comes back to just having one or two really good systems and investing heavily into those small handful of systems.
So eliminate that complexity that might come.
Exactly, because complexity creates its own problems in and of itself.
Yeah.
Another one, I'm kind of getting out of technology now, more into process, is the importance of a strong sales process. I saw this at HubSpot. I saw this at SEMrush. I saw this in my early days, even back at Capital IQ. It's just creating that repeatable process. And the reason this is so important is when you don't have that, your ramp time is extremely long for the reps. And there's two ways, I think, of looking at rep ramp time. There's how long does it take for them to technically ramp? We're going to give them a 6-month ramp, a 3-month ramp. What does that look like? And then there's also how long does it take to get to a plateau of productivity? And I looked closely at this back at HubSpot. The ramp time we would give to reps would be roughly about 6 months. And that was very generous, and they typically would do fairly well during that ramp period. But there was a plateau that they would hit at about 18 months. And it was really important that they would overachieve once they got to that plateau. So yes, they would ramp in 6 months, but then there's this other gradual ramp that would happen thereafter for another roughly 12 months. And then they would hit a real plateau. So there's almost 2 ramps that were going on. And understanding that second ramp took a while to figure out. But then I realized we were missing out on opportunity.
Do you have the processes with a clear handoff from marketing to sales to customer service? Do you have the data, and only the data that you need, not data that doesn't really mean anything, between marketing, sales, and customer service? And only then can we come in and say, okay, great. Now we can build a tech stack with the CRM at the center, which is then, of course, also your single source of truth, so that all the data and processes can be tracked through one system by all teams. And so we have to do the consulting for the implementation and the adoption, which again, for us is the most important thing to be successful.
I love to hear it. When the episode comes out, I'll shout it out to my LinkedIn network and certainly shout y'all out. It's funny. I'm actually about to head over to the Salesforce Tower. I just flew in to Salesforce. It'll come out later on this month. I'll be recognized as a Salesforce top sales influencer for the 4th year.
Wow.
So
Congratulations.
just really, yeah, thank you. Really fortunate. There's a company called Gridmate, which is a Salesforce add-on. They're part of the App Exchange.
Yep.
And they pretty much said, hey, we'd love for you to be an influencer to shout out what we're doing in the Salesforce ecosystem. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I'm curious, do y'all host any kind of events? Do you ever bring in speakers or MCs for any events that you host?
Pre-COVID, we did an annual event called Dynamicon. Our company is Dynamico. The conference was called Dynamicon. But we tried it in 2021 as a virtual event, and it just wasn't the same. So we're hoping that it's probably not going to happen this year, but we're hoping that next year, we're going to do some smaller events this year to kind of test if people are going to come back in person, because that event, we want to get to sort of 150, 200 people, in person.
I definitely want to reinforce that coaching is important, but we need those 3 components. And that's no different than what we need from our CRM, right? It's people, process, technology. One does not exist without the other. And in fact, they're becoming so aligned. I would also like to encourage everybody again to step back and look at your business. What are your goals? What are your KPIs? What are your tactics? And then make sure your CRM is aligned and make sure any technology rolled out has a value proposition to the people you're asking to use it so you get that adoption. Because without it, it's just another tool. And we all have plenty of those.
This is a good point, right? I see this all the time where it's like on the sales side, we might have a sales process and steps or stages in the CRM, and like having a clear and agreed upon definition of what these things are on one team is so important. Because like when you don't, what ends up happening is that you've got, if you go from discovery to demo as an example, like when does that actually happen? It may not seem like a big deal, but like what ends up happening, if people aren't aligned, then you start getting these, one rep has got an average days to close of like 100 days, whereas everyone else has got average days to close of 20 days as an example. It's like, well, why is it taking them so much longer, right? And that's just one example. Now you expand that to when sales hands something over to success, when marketing is involved, right? Like, and typically those are functions that live inside of different tools. And each team is getting better. They've implemented the tool, that they're using it. They've figured out like the right kind of playbooks, and they're making their teams more efficient with it. But there are these areas of overlap where the teams meet each other. And so you need to make sure that like everyone's on board and understands like how these things work together. And so if you're able to zoom out at the beginning and see how all this works, or the ideal state, right? You got to nail down what the process is, what the definitions are, so that when you are implementing everything, gives you the best chance to get it right as soon as possible. I'm not going to say the first time because it's nearly impossible to get it right the first time, but as quickly as possible.
Like, what do you mean show it to you? Where's it documented? People sit over my shoulder for 2 days and then they learn the process. Well, that's like a game of telephone. By the time it gets down to all the individual contributors and everybody's doing things a little bit differently. Truly document your processes. I promise you, it'll be more fun to run an organization when you can look around and go, golly, that's exactly the way that we want to do it. It's because we're following our process. It gives more confidence to the end users, to the customers too, as well. Man, these people are sharp. They know their stuff, but it seems like they're really guiding us through, or, that's an external version of a process. And internally, even as new contributors are coming on, we're onboarding new people. Same thing. Hey, honey, how's your day today? God, it was great. It seems like these people got their act together. Wow. The first week's filled out, the next month's filled out, and I'm learning stuff, and they seem like they're really aligned around what it takes to get this job done. I'm liking what I'm hearing so far.
Yeah, which we often talk about that example when it comes to, you cannot provide the best customer experience until you have the best employee experience. That same person who comes home and says, hey, honey, this was awesome at the Sunday barbecue or wherever they get together with their friends, where ultimately everyone starts talking about how things at work. The person who says, oh, it's amazing. I've got the processes are awesome. They're not saying it in these terms, obviously, and I have all the tools I need to do my job properly.
The new compensation model, all of those things are in the pipeline velocity bucket. Then you go further, we call it the customer time to value. And I'll go in one more, which is customer expansion. Those are the next 2 pillars. Customer time to value and customer expansion really focus on what we call is NRR, net revenue retention, because we all know if you're a RevOps person, you probably are very close to this. If a company has over 100% or 120% NRR, you know it's a healthy business. You know that your customers are staying with you. You know that you can actually take now bets in the marketplace because you don't have to always worry about acquisition. So that's what customer time to value and customer expansion is. Then RevOps, which is literally your area of expertise, is one of the pillars. We actually debated, Brandon, quite a bit to put RevOps in the center of the operating system to a pillar because we believe that it's like the nervous system of how go-to-market should run. But we also recognize that the RevOps is good and important and is the cornerstone for a lot of the work we do strategically. It's also important to recognize that all these pillars don't feel like they are not as important. So we have to turn that into a pillar. And again, that's just through a lot of interviews and research.
Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.